Hi there, I'm Ben Pearce and welcome to the Tech World Human Skills Podcast. Every episode we talk through how to thrive in the tech world, not just survive. And if the podcast is not enough for you and you want weekly tips delivered straight to your inbox, sign up for the Elevated You newsletter. Head over to www.techworldhumanskills.com to sign up. Hey folks, and welcome to the Tech World Human Skills Podcast. Today, we're talking about startup funding. Now, I've always heard people talking about angel investors and seed money and Series B, but never fully got my head around it. So today, we're going to go through a startup funding 101 session. Now, to share his pearls of wisdom, we've got a real expert. He is the founder and CEO of Black Valley, an organisation focused on supporting Black-led startups to access funding to start and scale their business. So please welcome to the show, Leke Sholuade. Leke, it is brilliant to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you for having me. Excited to be a part of the show.
Well, it's lovely to have you with us. And shall we start off? Could you give us a brief introduction to your background and what you're up to?
Yeah, I mean, background-wise, I actually have an unusual career. I'm sure a lot of people say that within this space when they come on a podcast like this. I started my career in the non-for-profit sector, mainly because I've always been driven by wanting to help people and make the world a better place. So I was working for a charity here in the UK around social integration, which is about bringing young people from different backgrounds together to equip them with skills to make them more employable in the future. And I was working in a sales role straight from university. I always say to people, selling to young people is one of the hardest jobs you could do, especially 15 to 17-year-olds, because they are a hard audience to convince and they will always tell you the truth. So I learned a lot within that role. Started off by, I guess, front of house, selling an assembly on a Monday morning, presenting to young people about sign up for the program that we offer. Taught me a lot about public speaking, which I used to be terrified of. And then as things developed, I actually grew within the organization, that role, to become a sales manager and learning a lot of skills along the way. And actually, because of the way the organization was set up, got a bit of exposure to program delivery and setup. And then I then made the transition. Accidentally, actually, I was trying to look for a new role and wouldn't advise people to do this, but lazily on LinkedIn was applying with the LinkedIn Easy Apply jobs. And I ended up getting an interview for a job with an edtech company, which then became my introduction to the tech world. And doing that role for around 2 years, working in business development. Now, the really exciting thing about that role was I was exposed to a lot of things around startup. It was a very young organization when I joined, fairly about, I think 6 people when I joined. And within that period, we actually raised a pre-seed round of 3 million from Lego Ventures. So that kind of introduced me to this access to funding route, going from an idea, and then seeing an institutional investor invest in that idea really. Fast forward, COVID happened. I was on furlough in the UK. We had a system called furlough where luckily the Prime Minister was subsidizing workers' salary. So being on furlough meant you were not necessarily working for your business, but you were at home and you still got paid. And like most people, I had a lot of free time in my hand to think about actually what's next for my future and for my career. Whilst thinking about that, the incident around the murder of George Floyd happened, which happened on the state side, but the ripple effect of that, we saw that across the globe, especially being someone of an African diaspora living in the UK. I wanted to do something to really drive change in this space for the global south, especially people of an African origin, which led to this idea of creating the Black Valley, which I'll talk about a bit more later on. But essentially, that inspired what's now a Black Valley. As Ben mentioned, we've gone through different iterations, but essentially, we want to make sure Black people are able to develop the next technologies that influence the way we see and interact with the world. And the best way we're doing that now is, by closing that funding gap to people that look like myself, really.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your introduction, and you've started to sort of nudge us in the direction of funding, and let's get in there. So, funding. Why do you need funding when you start a business?
Really good question. And I think there's probably many reasons you need funding when you start a business. But I'll break them down into three areas. Like the first one's around like that startup capital. So you've got a great idea and you need to, I guess, take that from an idea to a viable business. And there's a lot of costs associated with that. That cost could look like creating what's called like an MVP, minimum viable product. So something to test whether people actually want what you're creating, right? To validate that the customer actually want the solution to your problem, and that's a genuine pain point they're willing to pay for. There's other costs associated with that. You created this MVP. You need to market that to people. It's not good enough saying you have a solution, but actually, how do people find out about the solution? So you need to market and sell that really. In, as well as that, you probably need some additional costs around the setup, either legal, just setting up the business in general. So that's the initial startup capital, and that tends not to be that much. We'll come to maybe more detail on that later on. The other side of things is, I guess, cost. So once you then, start this great thing that you build at that early stage, it's probably yourself, maybe two friends that you started with. You know, customers are on board onto what you've created. It's doing quite well. You need to, I guess, operationalize the business and bring in more people to help you as you to meet the demand basically in the business. And that's probably like a big expense on this stage. You're probably not generating enough revenue to meet that demand. So you will need to raise more money essentially to meet that operational cost demand and pay for the cost of our additional people. The third part is probably most common, especially if you're looking to build a certain kind of business, which is an high growth business, and that's what a startup ideally should be, is to, I guess, scale the business and attack new markets really. The startup model is quite simple, essentially. Essentially, is to try and capture as much of the market as possible, and to give yourself that competitive advantage. The space moves quite fast. So if you have a new product or a new service, the idea is there are other people looking at that space. So you want to be, front of house and make sure you're the go-to person when looking at that problem, really. And there's cost associated with that. That cost could look like actually we've now, got a good share of the market in the UK, for example, and we're looking to go to the other side of the world, somewhere like the States, and attract more customers there. There's cost associated with that. There's probably research and design that you need to do around that as well. Then it's probably innovation cost as well that you need to make sure you keep yourself competitive. So I saw those three areas is probably, or three events, what tends to lead to you needing funding as a business. So that initial stage when you just got the business, so that startup cost, when you're starting to maybe add more operational cost, more people to help you grow the business beyond yourself and maybe one or two friends you start the business with, and then
Yeah.
expansion, like taking on new markets is probably the third stage.
Okay. Now, before we get into the real details of the different types of funding, what's the climate of funding like at the moment? Given the state of the economy, all the things that are happening around the world with elections and government changes and all of that kind of stuff. Is it easy to get funding for tech startups and tech scale-ups at the moment?
Yeah, great question, Ben. I think it probably depends who you speak to.
Okay.
Overall, the environment has changed. I started Black Valley in 2020 during the pandemic when interest rates was quite low,
Yeah.
which means a lot of people were looking to get more better returns on their money. So there was more money going to private market, especially the VC stage. So there was more money flowing down
Okay.
to founders. Now the macroeconomics has changed. Essentially, there's high interest rates, so people could leave the money in the bank and probably get a better return and maybe less risky than venture making an investment into founders of venture investment. Meaning then there isn't that much capital going around. in addition to that as well, we've seen a change in terms of like there tends to be these trends anyway within VC funding. 2020 you could argue like crypto, Web3, metaverse was a trend. Um, Now we're looking more around AI. So I say that to say two things. Probably a lot more difficult and challenging now to raise money as a founder. The goalpost has probably shifted. Before you probably could raise more funding based on your idea. Now, a lot of, especially around the VC stage, are looking for a bit more traction in terms of where you are as a business. In addition to that as well, I would even argue if you're not raising some sort of AI business around an AI technology business at the moment, or even a business around climate or sustainability, it's probably going to be hard for you to raise money in this environment.
Really, so very AI, and interesting you say sustainability actually focused as well. So, but those are the two things that everybody wants to fund at the moment. So ideas in other spaces are just a bit harder to get people to chuck their dollars and pounds into.
Yeah, exactly that. And like I said earlier, it's a trend, right? We've seen this trend, and it's probably cycles, right?
Yeah.
Similar to when crypto was the biggest thing, or Web3 was like the odd thing and the focus now. And I would say probably less of a trend is AI and sustainability, right? Climate is changing, and we all need to care. So those two, it's probably a bit more different from the crypto and Web3 space. But at the same time, that is the focus, or where the opportunity seems to lie at the moment, really.
Okay. Well, should we start to talk about then the different types of funding? We did a little prep call. We had a little catch up a few weeks or a month ago. Just talking about what we might talk about. And I know nothing about this world. So, do you want to start to talk us about some of the different and the things you sort of threw out before when we talked was grant funding, debt funding, equity based funding, things like that. So do you want to? Should we go through some of those? Do you want to start with grant funding? What is grant funding all about?
Yeah, I think, thanks for kind of like laying this in really. Essentially what you've said, I'll probably say there's there's four main brackets I'll put the funding stages on. And the first one that you speak about, grant funding, probably the best kind of funding to go for really, because there's no cost associated with it. By that I mean you're not required to pay it back. Typically, this could look like a government uh, initiative. So here
Yeah.
in the UK, where I'm based, we have an organization called Innovate UK. Essentially, that organization is responsible for making sure the UK remain competitive when it comes to innovation and empowering the economy really. And there's a bulk of finance available for startups and scale-ups to access to be able to be competitive and like make the UK competitive market as well. Typically, there are funding rounds that startups can apply for as well, as well as that. Some private institutions maybe looking at sustainability, for example, that the mission aligned with that, and they want to make sure there's innovation in that space, and they'll have a pocket of funding available that startup and business could apply for to be able to innovate in that space. Really, these are not easy to get. Most people tend to use third parties to help them write the grants, but again, I think they tend to be quite time consuming. As you can imagine, as a founder, you have a lot of priorities that you need to focus on. Maybe, yeah, filling one of these things can be quite challenging, but it's worth it in that sense because, like I said, you're not required to pay. But yeah, so that's it around crowdfunding, really.
Nice. So that's grant funding. What's that? Debt funding. What's debt funding?
Yeah, debt funding typically, I would say, is going for a loan either from the bank or other private institution. Typically, you're borrowing an amount of capital, and there's an interest associated with that. People get scared when you mention no, but actually, I would probably say this is a cheaper version of how you could raise money for your business, really, because the interest rate, yeah, is poor in comparison to when we talk about maybe equity based funding and what the cost of that could look like. for your business. The only thing around this, banks are not the most startup friendly, essentially because they're bank lend against risk. And as a startup, you have loads of risk, right? You're still figuring out. You don't necessarily have like a historic finance, in terms of like, historic finance. You don't probably necessarily have assets that the bank could lend against as well. So it's probably a bit more difficult to get funding around this space. There are innovative challenger banks that lend this space. Previously, we had Silicon Valley Bank, which was quite founder friendly and VC friendly. But now, after the crisis that happened around 2022, 2023, they've now been acquired in the UK specifically by HSBC and called HSB Innovation Banking. So typically, they will lend. They're more likely to lend to startups because they understand the need of startups better, really.
Yeah, and I guess you just need a really solid business case. They're not going to just give you, here's 100,000, just because you've asked for it. They're still quite risk averse, aren't they? So they're going to be wanting a solid plan. How are you going to pay it back? What's the business plan to be able to get that kind of level of funding?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So grant funding, time consuming but free money. Debt funding, a bit harder to get because you need to show your like you say your track record, your history, but quite cheap in that you don't have to give away bits of your business and that kind of stuff. So that's debt funding. And then the next one, which seems to be more complicated, equity based funding. Is that the next one of the four?
Yeah, equity-based funding, and this is the most, I guess, popular one actually, the one that we see most of. I'll probably use the word like, is the sexiest one, is the one most people talk about when they think about accessing finance. To put it simply, this is giving a stake away in your business to an investor in return for capital. What that means essentially is, for example, I say, I love what you're doing with this podcast, and I see the potential within this business, and I speak to you, and I reach out to you, you reach out to me, and I give you 10K for 10% of your business. And there's probably a lot of things that I've considered on my side, a lot of things that makes it more, I guess, a viable alternative for you, because one, 10K could mean you're able to buy better equipment. We were speaking about equipment earlier. Pay for like more marketing to make you more to reach better audience, and actually that would get you to the next level. For me, I'm seeing this opportunity. I could see a potential about Ben being the next Stephen Butler in terms of like the potential of the podcast, and I believe my return will be better in the future. What I would say about equity funding as well, like there's something called smart money. So not all money are good money. Essentially, you want an investor that has a value add as well. So I'll say founders need to, when you're going for funding, it's not just the cost in terms of the equity you're giving away. Actually, what can the investor add to your business? There's strategic investors, right? So, for example, we're using the example of a podcast, right? Does the founder like have very good, strong media? Investor have very strong media presence that they could connect you to? Or are they someone that's very savvy with things like TikTok that could make you go viral? And there are value that they could add to your business introductions
and that's
as well
what you
that they
see
could make for
lots
you.
on the TV shows, isn't it? So things like Dragon's Den, Shark Tank, those kind of things, where they're trying to get investors that have got real skills to come into the business. It's not just the cash they want, it's the skills as well.
Yeah, exactly. And because the business is about how can I get from A to B, and the B is the scaling part, right? And there's the in between is like, what don't you know, the connections that you need, and actually if you get someone that can give you the money and show you how to navigate, how to get to B, that's the ideal scenario, really. And it's a lot more efficient for you because you're less likely to make the mistake, which can be costly, and you win on time as well. You get there quicker.
And so anyone can do that, can't they? So I guess maybe for some businesses, when they start off, they might get family and friends, that have got some cash, the bank of mum and dad, whoever it is, that might have a bit of cash that they can seed the business and get it going. So it feels like that's one route where you can do it. But then it also then seems, and this is the bit where I don't know much about it now, is then you've got the more serious way, like where you are getting venture capitalist angel investors. You've got things like Series A, Series B, Series C. These are the bits that I don't understand, where it feels a bit more serious in terms of the equity investors. So could you maybe talk us through how does the serious side, like when it's not your mum and your dad and your grandma and your buddy and your friends that are giving you, and you're giving them a bit of, some shares in the business, how does it work when it's the serious side of equity-based funding?
Yeah, no, great question. What I would say, about equity-based funding, like with family and friends, I think that's actually way to for those that have like if family and friends that are quite high net worth individuals that could invest in your business, that is the perfect way to start. There's still risks associated, and you need to make sure you communicate that with them that the money could they could lose all their money, and that needs to be clear. And there's probably that weight that you need to be comfortable carrying. Are you going to be responsible for the remortgaging of your parents' house and then not having that money back, kind of thing? So I think there's a seriousness around that essentially. But back to your point around then, actually beyond that, right? The first level actually is angel investors, right? And actually, this is the one that's really important again, and is one that no one typically, actually I say no one, but typically no one walk around with a sign on their head saying I'm an angel investor. And the smart way actually is to someone's actually shared with me recently. Actually, who can you convert to being an angel investor in terms like, do you know any high net worth individuals within your circle that you could pitch the idea to them about investing in your business?
Okay.
Some people probably have 50K plus sitting in an account. They're not necessarily getting that much return for it in a bank, and they know you, Ben. They know you. What you're doing is great. They believe in the idea, actually. And there's probably different reasons why they will invest in you. One is they want to learn about what the space that you're building. They're really intrigued, and they get to go on that journey with you. Those are like most investors, angel investors, actually sit in that pot of like, I want to go on this journey with this founder. I want to learn from them. I want to learn about this space, right? And they still want the return on their investment, so which is great. Once you've got some angel investors in place, and then you move to, I guess, the area that you said around like serious and what we probably classify as your first institutional investment, right? This is, again, there are stages. It's probably almost like a funnel in a way, and it doesn't necessarily flow as easily, but for ease of like explanation, you have the first stage of that funnel, which is your pre-seed investment. There are most investors probably have like different bucket that they're focused on. Some investors will probably focus on this stage, right? The pre-seed stage. Others might focus all across the road. The pre-seed investors will have, I guess, their sweet spot, and they typically write a smaller check size. And at this round, you're looking to raise maybe up to 300K. And what you're trying to do is that first stage I spoke about, which is validate your business idea. So like build your first MVP and validate that customers want to pay for it, really. So there's a lot of risk at this stage, right? Essentially, that's what that stage look like. In terms of how you find these investors, and probably apply for everyone else. Typically, most people probably join accelerator programs or do some research online in terms of like what investors are focusing on this pre-seed stage. And it's also important to understand what sector you're focusing on, because most investors are not sector agnostic. They have their sweet spot, as I mentioned. So some investor might only be looking at climate tech, for example. So that's their thesis. So thesis is basically the investor's idea of how they will make their return, and they have an area that they believe that's the best opportunity, and that's expertise to add value in that space. So that would be the pre-seed stage.
And
Any
typically
questions around that before?
So typically you give away a portion of your business, and then all future profits are then returned, and dividend payments and all of those sorts of things. But how much of your business do you typically give away in a pre-seed round? Is there a rule of thumb?
Yeah, good question. So people say you try to stay around the 20%, 20 to 25% mark every round, actually.
Okay.
But it gets complicated a little bit, which I'm not going to go into the details around, but because you
Okay.
can't get diluted as an early stage investor. So because you invest, 10% into you own 10% stake in the business, doesn't mean that 10% stake in the business stays 10% all throughout to the exit of the business,
Yeah.
which we'll talk about in a second. So when
Yeah.
a new round of investment comes in, unless you add in new money, your initial 10% will get diluted essentially because the math gets a bit complicated because
Yeah.
the value of the business has increased, so your 10% reduced as a result of that.
Okay. So pre-seed, very early. What's the next phase?
Yeah, the next stage is now seed. So which means you validated the idea, and now you kind of want to, I guess, acquire customers within this space. Really, this tends to be like a chunkable size of investment, and this we're looking up to 2 million in this space, and it will vary
Yeah.
from different companies. I say up to 2 million. You do have, maybe your open AI or like a really hot startup that raises 100 million plus as a seed funding. So those are very special
Yeah.
case. Recently, one of the co-founders of OpenAI, Ilya, started another AI business, and he raised ridiculous amount as like a seed funding stage.
Okay.
I think around like 200 plus. So those are typically unusual, but as
Okay.
a general rule of thumb, you're looking at up to 2 million to acquire customers and move away from the MVP and build the actual product, basically.
Okay. So seeding is basically scaling out. We've got a working MVP, and now we want to take this to market, and we need that money to really start to scale that a little bit.
Yeah, and build the actual, so away from the MVP, the actual product in itself.
Yeah. Okay. So the actual working product and scaling it, which then starts to take us to then I hear about this Series A, Series B, Series C stuff. What's all that about?
Yeah, I mean, Series A, Series B, Series C. The one word to summarize all this round is just, I guess, scaling. It's like essentially and reaching new markets, and there's um, you're reaching different, I guess, checkpoints at this stage. Really, Series A tend to be typically, again, I'll say 2 to 15 million at this stage, depending on the business. What you're looking to do at this stage is make key hires into the business. So maybe you're starting to look at like senior executives at this stage, people with different expertise, people that maybe taking the business from certain stage to a different stage. You're looking to go into new markets, as we mentioned earlier, like you previously operated in the UK, quite a small market. You're looking to address the US market, so you're bringing a go-to-market person that understand that and understand how to go across the pond really. So that's kind of what you're doing at this stage really. Series B, you're probably looking at 25 million plus. Series C, 50 million plus. But again, your milestones basically. That milestones could look like capturing more new markets at this stage. Almost maybe developing like a moat around your business. This could look like you're acquiring your competitors in a way to add like I mean maybe like a Facebook, for example, acquiring Meta, what's now called Meta, acquiring Instagram. Like you're building this wraparound support ecosystem within your business that makes it harder for everyone else in this space to compete against you. Really.
Okay. And so Series A, B, C, and does it tend to finish at Series C, or what happens after Series C?
Some startups might do multiple rounds, so there could be a Series D, there could be a Series
Okay.
E. Even within rounds, there could be like an extension round. There
Okay.
could be a down round as well. You ideally don't want a down round. There could be a down round in like a difficult market like this. But essentially, in a smooth sailing round, you could Series A, Series B, Series C, depending on like how hot the market is, how hot the business is. Um, then you have what we call the exit event, and this is kind of like where we would probably talk about a little bit more.
Yeah, and this I think is really interesting because Yeah, so I, a couple of years ago, started my own business, and I started it with a view of this is the mission, and this is what I want to try and do. This is the product I want to try and sell, and and all of that kind of stuff. When we were chatting around this topic before, you were saying to me that everybody else is thinking about the exit event. Right from the beginning, these investors are thinking, right, what's your exit event? And I found this quite surprising. So yeah, can you talk to us? What is the exit event, and then what are the different sort of approaches that people are sort of aiming for?
No, good question. Again, as mentioned earlier, there are different types of funding. I think as a founder, you need to decide at the beginning, right? What kind of business do you want to build? And that's a really important question. Not everyone actually might have the desire to go down the venture route or to build like, a really high growth business. An example like or of a startup on steroid would be something like Uber. And if you look at the Uber journey in terms of like, how many markets Uber operates in, how long it takes for Uber to be like actually profitable. I think Uber became profitable recently. Um, then we have, I guess, once you've received VC funding, the investor has an interest in your company, and that interest in your company is for them to make the return on the investment that they put in your business. And then for us to really understand this, we need to understand how does like the venture game work in a way. So typically, a VC fund, let's take it 10 million. So maybe at the seed stage, that invests in pre-seed to seed stage, will have let's say 10 million to invest in a startup, and they will typically maybe write 300 to 500k checks, and they might write about 20 checks within the life cycle of that fund. For every startup they invest in, they need that startup to return the old fund and more. The assumption is a lot of those startups will not work out, like, but actually one in 10 will return the fund size and more. The VC needs to be able to prove to what's called the LP, so limited partners, which is where the VCs get their money from, that they're able to find great opportunity like your business, and they're able to then return that money back and get more money to, I guess, carry on that game really. So what does that mean for you as a startup? That means that VC has a timeline. They're looking like within the next 8 years, your business needs to have an exit event really ideally from when that money went in, maybe at the early stage. And obviously depending on what stage the VC is at in terms of like, whether they're at the C stage or Series B plus stage, that cycle is probably shorter for them as well. So talking about a seed stage investor, probably looking at 8 years. So if they invest money into you, typically they want something to happen. You can't just hold on to the business and keep plugging and generate a bit of profit this year, a bit of profit next year, because they don't get anything from that. There's no, there's no dividends being paid out to them as a fund, right? So something needs to happen that they get their money back. And there's three ways something happens. Probably not great outcome for you as a founder. You go bust, which means your business is one of the 9 ones that fail. But at least they could write that off and focus their attention on different things, right?
Right.
And I know you probably will talk about that a bit more, but that's an excellent that needs to happen. The second one is M&A. You get acquired by a different business. We spoke about maybe some like a Instagram getting acquired by a Meta earlier.
Yeah.
That could be a great
Okay.
event.
So
In
some
terms
other
like
big company, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, decide you're the company that's got this niche wrapped up, and they're just going to come and acquire you.
Yes, that could be for a significant amount, or actually that could not be that much. So it depends on like the rationale around that. Really. So that's probably less favorable to the investor. In some cases, it could still be a win because depending on like the size of that um, um, M&A really in that case. The next stage, I guess, is like the dialing of like of a VC investment really, which is like your IPO. Most VC funds or most VC investment, you need to have that hunger and that desire to build an audacious business that could become a unicorn, which is a company worth like 1 billion plus. And a VC is looking at that because that's in terms of like fund mathematics, that's when they start seeing the return on the fund really. An IPO is an initial public offering where shares in your business is being sold in the public market, and everyone that has shares in the business then get some money back for it.
And so that's, you can list on the NASDAQ, the London Stock Exchange, whoever it might be, you go and now you're a publicly traded company.
Exactly. And as you probably could imagine, not a lot of business get to that stage. And I think that needs to be emphasized really. Like, if you want to go down this VC route, you have to have like an hunger and a desire as a founder, like to really want to build something that's, like, yeah, a beast of a company, really. And you have, I don't think not everyone is built that way. But if you are and you have that desire, you have that hunger, the reward is risk reward as well. Could be incredible. You could change the trajectory of not just your life, but the people around you.
Yeah. Yeah. Leke, this has
And
been
and
really
and
interesting. Oh, no, carry on. One last thing, carry on.
impact as well, right? I think we focus so much on like the financial returns at this stage, right? At all these stages of the company, like in theory, the bigger the business, the more impact you're making, right? A business that gets to IPO means it's serving more people, solving more like that problem for a lot more people, really. So, again, I use the example of Uber, right? If Uber stayed in the US, not like it wouldn't have been able to like attack the market in Africa, attack the market in the UK, and like actually be when we think about Uber now with or getting a taxi, Uber is probably the first thing that comes to mind. So that's impact, right? It's changed the way we think about transport. It's changed the way we get from A to B, really. Like, and it's moved now. Innovation moving to like food. Now you could potentially even book your flights on Uber. So like, it's that idea of like creating something from your head and like creating solution for billions of people across the globe. So we are focused on the money, but the impact potential as well is still there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Leke, we are running fast out of time. This has been really interesting, and I've learned loads from this. So really brilliant, really brilliant. What would be your key takeaways as we start to summarize, Leke? What would you want people to take away from this?
Yeah, great question. Reflect on myself, right? This space was new to me. Actually, less than 4 years ago. Completely new space that I didn't understand or have a clue about, really. But the first thing was working that startup environment showed to me that actually it's possible to get investment for your business. I think the key takeaway for someone with an idea here is actually there are options out there for you to get investment in your business, and don't be scared of the idea of getting investment in your business. Especially speaking from an underrepresented founder background, we're more likely to try and bootstrap our business, whereas we might have a great idea, and it's important to go out there and find the funding to make sure we're able to not just, I use the word suffer as a founder to really build this business, not paying yourself, not being able to do things and like actually earning money and putting back in the business. When actually the way to grow the business is to use other people's money. That's what funding is. You're using other people's money to grow your business. So I think it's really important for people to take one thing away. If you have a great business and the business works, there are people looking for the opportunity to invest in your business. For them, they're making more money. And two, they want to be part of your journey. They want to create the next big thing as well. And they want to be part of your legacy. So it's important for you to go out there. And my second point is there are different like way to raise funding. And myself included, I think we're all fascinated by this VC route. It's not for everyone. And you should make sure you understand what you're signing up for, right? I was listening to a podcast recently and talk about, sometimes founders end up building a case for themselves. Actually, for some people, a significant amount of money might be getting their company acquired or sold for like 3 million, 4 million. That would be a life-changing amount for them. For a VC investment, that's a terrible outcome. So if you understanding actually before, it's like designing a business, it's like designing your life really. Actually, what kind of business you want to build? What does like success looks like to me? Because there is a lot of noise out there, and don't be distracted by those noise. So first one, is possible for you to get funding, and a lot of people want to fund and be part of your journey. Two, be really clear about actually what kind of business you want to build and what does success look like for you, really.
Yeah, brilliant. And sort of as I reflect on it, I've learnt loads of stuff from this, and I think this idea of grant funding, free funding, government giving you money to start up, or getting money from the bank, the debt funding, and then that equity funding, and then just the different rounds, how it all works, and then just this idea of an exit event. I'd not really considered how important that was as you start to get into equity funding. So absolutely fascinating. So thank you for making all this so accessible and so clear. Final thing, if people are interested in the things that you've said, interested in Black Valley and want to get in touch, how can people get hold of you?
Yeah, great question, Ben. I'm quite visible on LinkedIn. So Leke Sholuade, Leke, first name. I think maybe I'm only a few people call that. Our website is www.blackvalley. So play on word of Silicon Valley, blackvalley.co.uk. Or you can actually drop us an email, info@blackvalley.co.uk. If you're a Black business looking to raise some funding, we'd love to hear from you. If you're an investor looking to connect with some great, exciting Black founders right here in the UK, we'd love to hear from you as well.
Brilliant. Well, Leke, there's only one thing left for me to do, and that is to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to talk to us. It's been brilliant. Thank you so much, Leke.
Thank you, Ben. Really great. Enjoy being part of the podcast. Thank you.
Well, there we go. Thanks for listening. Remember, if the podcast is not enough for you and you want weekly tips delivered straight to your inbox, sign up for the Elevated You newsletter. Head over to www.techworldhumanskills.com to sign up. Oh, and can you do me a favour? Could you subscribe to the podcast and rate the show? It really helps spread the word.